Over the past few weeks, the customer service world has been particularly saturated with announcements of LLM integrations. This is not a huge surprise though. Over 70% of global data and analytic decision makers whose organizations are implementing AI said that their companies plan to increase spending on transformer networks and LLM integrations over the next 12 months. Undoubtedly, hence, generative AI is the talk of the town, and many want to be first to the party. From increasing developer productivity through text to code generation, enabling graphic designers to ideate quickly with text to image generators, to empowering marketing and content creators, LLM applications are everywhere. But this technology is still a black box for many. We are here to unveil what it means for your enterprise and for your customer support function in particular. I'm excited to welcome the panelists of our keynote session, Rowan Karan, analyst at Forrester, and Alok Ramsasaria, CEO, Grizzy Interactive, to discuss this in detail. Welcome, Rowan. Welcome, Alok. We are glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
To kick off, Alok, if I may start with you, we're honestly witnessing a pivotal moment in AI unfold right before our eyes. Enterprises are all going crazy about experimenting with this technology. And as someone who's at the center of all this LLM innovation happening at Grizzy, what are your 2 cents for enterprises looking to reap its benefits, but also staying mindful of potential pitfalls and security risks?
I agree. I think you captured it perfectly. It's the perfect storm, right? This is everybody's worried. I think I speak to a couple of CIOs every week about, and their top priority is that the boards are asking them, okay, what to do about generative AI, what to do about LLMs, how to innovate in the enterprise. While I think ChatGPT in particular has captured the public imagination of the world at large, and every day there are both expectation, I would say, epitomes of despair and depths of despair and epitomes of hope that emerge every day. I think at enterprises, we all need to evaluate very carefully what to invest in, how to invest in. Do not, I think, this is what we tell all our CIO customers, don't look at blanket LLMs. They're still fairly insecure. There are no guardrails really out there. And, black hat actors are using these probably as much as the white hat actors. So make sure that you're not investing blindly. Look at feature/function specific models that will work for support, for sales use cases. Make sure there are strong security data processing agreements in place to ensure that your LLM is not going to result in leakage of confidential customer, product, services data that could be of benefit in the open world. Do ask for explainability, and not even more than explainability, the ability to control the backend, right? The lack of an administrative control is a key challenge to a lot of enterprises. If they can't see what's going on with the tool, then they are very wary of investing in that tool. And it applies to LLMs as well. Where are the knobs that I can see? Where are the reports that I can look at? I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of these large models like ChatGPT are not really trained on the specific subsets. So either some of these models are now available. They're, I think, a few gigabytes, so you can run them in your own private instance. Look at those, or look at specific small models that are being evaluated and that are trained on your use case, which will give you probably better results. And use them selectively. Large language models are exactly that. They're large language models. And I know I'm sounding slightly skeptical while acknowledging the power that it suddenly puts in the hand of the individual. Inside the enterprise, you have to make sure that, I know some enterprises have, for example, completely banned using ChatGPT while they are able to establish the security profile of ChatGPT on official laptops. So I think, as you mentioned, it's a inflection point. We all need to figure out our strategies, and I think we are particularly privileged to have Rowan here with us, who's been exploring this in detail to help us navigate the waters. So over to you, Rowan. I look forward to learning from you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Alok. So happy to be here with you all. And I'm so excited to talk to everybody about generative AI today, and specifically some of the applications for it in customer service. So to kind of kick us off here, I'm going to start by talking a bit about, generative AI as a whole. So I think, as many of us have come to realize around this space, at the beginning, it seemed like this kind of magical tool that would allow us to do many things, just with the snap of our fingers. But really, this is all about, just making these very hard problems a bit smoother, a bit less challenging. It's about making rocket science easier, not making rocket science easy. And when we're looking at this space, or when we look at the enterprise overall, we've seen artificial intelligence exploding across it for, a number of years at this point, even before this current surge and takeover of the cultural zeitgeist by generative AI, driven by the release of ChatGPT about 5.5 months ago. And even before this, we were seeing a trend that would have almost 100% of companies using some type of AI by 2025. So according to our data serving a variety of data and analytics professionals across enterprise level companies, in 2020, 68% of them were using or expanding their use of AI. By 2022, that had risen to 72%, and we expected that to continue up to 100% when we were looking at these predictions last fall. Now I expect this to be up to 100% by probably the end of 2024, given the embedding and adoption of generative AI. And one important aspect of this is, even again before this current surge of attention around generative AI, is that enterprises were seeing tremendous value from their AI projects. So we saw 74% of the companies that had adopted AI in various use cases or across the company were seeing a positive return and positive effects upon their company. But let's talk about the moment that we're in right now, and obviously that is generative AI. So first, let's kind of level set and talk about what we mean by generative AI. So you can find a number of different definitions from a number of different folks, but the way we define it at Forrester, which I think is a nice, middle ground of a lot of some of the extreme views of this, is that it's a set of technologies and techniques that leverage massive corpuses of data. And these technologies and techniques include things like large language models, generative adversarial networks, diffusion models, and other types of transformer networks, and likely other types of machine learning models down the road as continued research and progress is made. And these are used to generate new content in the form of images, audio, code, and text. And the inputs currently can be natural language prompts or things like images for diffusion models. But looking to the future, we really expect to see, other types of inputs being made available. So we've seen the first generation of what we call multimodal large language models come out of the research space, things like Cosmos 1 and GPT-4 allegedly as well. And this is really, again, going to change the landscape even further. But we won't talk about that too much more now. We're going to talk about what is the already here and now capabilities and challenges to face around generative AI. So looking at the landscape today, it's come a long way very quickly. So in 2018 was when we saw the first release of, the first set of models we could truly call large language models with GPT-2 and BERT. And if we look across the next several years, there's a number of different major models that have been released. And looking at the white text here, you'll see models that are proprietary models. And then in orange, you have models that are in the open source. So as you can see, there's both a variety of open source and proprietary models just on the major side. And then if we look beyond this, there's a whole broad landscape, sea, ocean world of large language models and other types of transformers that are being made available. So there's a whole set of choices to be made around what types of models you're using and what circumstances you're using them for. And in terms of where you can use them across the enterprise, well, the possibilities are almost endless. So this is, just a quick horizontal view of some of the different types of roles that generative AI is going to impact immediately and over the next several years. So at the top, there's been a lot of conversations around marketing and design folks using generative AI to create marketing copy, to write drafts of emails, to create images for client-facing content, to work it into their digital processing or their digital content creation pipelines. And there's a lot of use there, and there's a lot of potential impacts for the future. But what we want to talk about a bit more today is the impact on sales, support, operations, and customer service. Because a lot of the impact of generative AI is not necessarily going to be in these bright, shiny chatbot customer-facing use cases that we're going to get from the marketing, design, and maybe the web teams. It's really going to come from the process and employee and customer experience augmentation use cases that we're going to get that are going to come from more of the back of the house. So in addition to the use cases around customer service and customer and employee support, there's also a ton of impacts around IT and developers and data scientists, a whole world of Turing bots that we unfortunately don't have time to go into today, but will be another layer of really changing the way we build and deploy applications into the future. So the first part of this that I want to talk about is around organizing and retrieving knowledge. And obviously, this is a huge part of delivering good service to our customers, right? We need to know who they are. We need to know who we are as a company and how can we actually serve them and meet their needs better. So we can use large language models to do things like transform knowledge into different formats for easy consumption. So as an example, I took a report that I wrote for Forrester a year or so ago around cognitive search, and then I put it into the OpenAI Playground, which is what I'm using for an example, and I asked it to summarize it for a technologically minded audience, and then it produced a quite good result, which I could then take and use for example, a LinkedIn post to drive to this report. Or if I was a marketer and the starting data point was, say, a large white paper, I could use that to turn it into a blog post, to turn it into any other or another type of written content without necessarily having to do all of the work myself. But again, this is all about augmenting the employees. So when I was doing this, and if I'm using this in customer-facing or client-facing content, I still want to use the same types of quality control and testing and other types of controls and governance on this content before it reaches the client. And this is a really important aspect of generative AI overall, is that we can't give up and we can't forget about all the important work we've done to really make sure that we build up trust and integrity with our clients through all of these managed processes over the past several years. So when you're looking at building it with generative AI, it's very important to focus on use cases where you can really control the content that is going to hit the end user and not get starry-eyed with the idea of using a chatbot or having your own corporate version of ChatGPT. That is it's a possible thing to do today, but whether that chatbot is going to function like a exemplary employee versus someone who's completely trying to sabotage your company, well, it's probably going to fall a little bit more towards the latter of those things because of the inability to control all the responses. So when looking at large language models and generative AI right now, it's important to kind of target down to these tighter types of use cases like I'm showing here. And then it's also important to keep in mind that large language models themselves are not great sources of information. So we've all seen many different examples of how, ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Bard, whatever it may be, produces really surprising, repulsive, confusing answers and responses to folks sometimes. So, there's the very well-cited example of the journalist who wrote the whole article about how how Bing Chat was trying to get him to leave his wife and things of that nature. But when we're using these things in the enterprise, it's important to, again, come away from this, broad vision of, oh, these models can do anything for us, to really tighten up how we're using them. So when we're using them to retrieve knowledge, we can focus on what they're really good at. And one of those things is translating human-generated text into some other format, like we saw before. And so we can see how that's implemented here in Bing Chat. So for example, you ask how to treat a deep cut. It's not actually going into a large language model and having that large language model write in response just from its own generative capabilities. What this is doing is actually translating that query into these two subqueries that are being run across Bing Chat, or run across the Bing search engine, pardon me, per a normal search. And then when those come back, it's taking those, reading the sets of search results, and then generating this response below. And what that does is it allows for the model to cite its sources and point to the data that is originating the summarized response, so that the user can then click through and see, what the original source of data was if they want more detail, or to verify the search results. And so in a customer service use case, we could see how this would be very useful for a customer service and support rep to basically be querying the company data that they would do with a normal search engine, in previous circumstances. And in this case, they'd be able to get a more summarized answer for perhaps a more complex question. And if we think about, some of the applications for the previous use case that we saw around summarizing the text, already many customer service and support systems do a really great job of creating call transcripts from the customer service calls. If those had a large language model applied to them, they could be very easily summarized and also have, topics, entities, major sentiments, things of that nature extracted, because again, these are large language models, so they understand language quite well for these types of use cases. And then they also allow us to work more naturally with data. So one of the very big holy grails, pies in the sky, just real bugbears of the business intelligence and also customer service and support space was the ability to interact with data in a very through a very natural language type of interface. So natural language querying has been a very big differentiator for a lot of business intelligence companies for several years. But now with large language models, again, we can use them for what they're very good at, translating a human query into, say, a more structured query that could run across an Excel spreadsheet or across a SQL database, and allowing for us to have a more naturalistic interface on the human side that is still actually able to do more interesting work on the computer side. And so what we can see this leading to down the road, is essentially, composable interfaces for customer service folks, for generating on-the-fly reports for customers that are more in-depth and contain more information, say if it's a utility provider about their usage over time, some of their savings, or if it's an insurance provider about how their health and plan has been performing. Any types of data serving we can see being delivered in a more efficient way through these large language model supported applications. But how are we going to take these broad ideas and actually apply them to our enterprise? Well, the first overall thought that I want you to put into your mind is the idea that these foundational base models will understand your world, but understand the world. But for your enterprise use cases and to differentiate from your customers, these models need to understand your world, and they also need to understand it in a more succinct way than maybe some of the largest models do. And before we get into this, talking about some of the ways of applying the models, I want us to all take a step back and remember that it's not just about the models. Models are very important, but they didn't actually drive the current explosion in attention around generative AI or around large language models generally. An application did. It was ChatGPT as a fully deployed web application with a good user interface and a good user experience that got everybody's attention and really engaged everyone very, very deeply. So when we're thinking about what the use cases could be at our own companies, it's important to really focus on what is the end experience that we are creating, not just how can we use a large language model because it's the cool thing to do. So to give you an example of how you might do this, for a customer service or employee service application, you have a query coming into your enterprise AI ML platform if you're building it yourself. And in a normal circumstance, you might pull some data from your CRM, your customer churn model, maybe your sales forecast model to answer a question about who are the best possible customers to engage with. But you want to get that back in a human readable, cited, and dynamic result. So you could deploy a large language model within your AI ML platform to summarize the data that's coming out of those systems, or to run even a search across the knowledge graph to pull out more information about those customers and how they relate to each other. Or you could use one of the many API services that are available to send data out and get it back to build, say, a set of embeddings from a larger set of content that would then be indexed and searched by a search engine and then served to the large language model to provide, say, customer service reviews as part of the result that you're looking for. Or you could take a much more hands-off approach to this and integrate an LLM simply as an API experience interaction layer within your application. So not actually fully connecting it to any of your data sources, just using it as that query translation layer to turn that natural language query into something usable by all your data sets, and then transform the data sets back into something that's readable by a human. So overall, what this means is that we want to apply the power of large language models through fine-tuning and distillation. And so what this means is we start with these base models, whether it be GPT-3, Flan T5, or some of these others. And these are very powerful. They're cool robots that can do stuff for us, but we really want to turn them into, fully fleshed out, full res droids that serve our company. So we need to fine tune them. And we do that with instruction tuning, essentially. So questions and answers, large data sets of these that we give to the model so they better understand our enterprise, our circumstance, our customers. And that's what most of us will be doing. But then there's also another step of making these models more deployable. So being able to put them into any type of form factor, whether it be a laptop or, we've been seeing some initial research around being able to run diffusion models on smartphones. There was a recent announcement from a Google research team around this. And this is what's going to allow us to actually deploy a whole variety of these models across the enterprise. Because when we're looking forward with what this is actually going to look like for us, it's going to be very similar to how we look at the landscape of machine learning models within our enterprise. We don't just have one churn model that does everything for our customer churn predictions. We have dozens or hundreds. And so for the future, we're likely to have dozens of finely distilled and tuned models deployed across our enterprise and embedded within enterprise applications. But most of us don't need to worry about all the details in there. We just need to think about how are we going to acquire these large language models? And there's 3 different paths that you can currently take, and some of these overlap depending upon the choices you make. So at the most fundamental level, if you're going to build as much as possible, you can acquire a model. And this would involve getting an open source large language model, putting it behind your own firewall, and then doing work to fine tune it with an instruction data set. And then you could create various versions for other types of use cases. This involves the most technical skill and the most work to deploy the model, but you have the most control. The next level up, we have the cloud-based API services that allow you direct access to models, but it's more of a black box because you don't fully understand what is happening on the other side of that API. These models may allow you to fine-tune on top of their base model, or they may just offer a base model that is grounded for a particular use case, such as search. And then at kind of the most abstracted level, we have applications that are increasingly embedding large language models and other types of generative AI models within their overall functionality. And we've seen the first range of these announcements come in the past few months with the announcement of 365 Copilot's integration, as well as Google Workspace's integration with large language models. And then there's a whole set of standalone tools as well for text generation, for example, at the bottom. Writer and Jasper AI. And then there's knowledge discovery tools like some of these others here at the bottom that are also starting to integrate large language models as well. Now, what is this actually going to mean for a customer experience? Well, let's very quickly touch on that before we wrap up. So what this is going to mean is that the quality and kind of customer experience that we can deliver is going to change. So we may have a customer that comes in and says, hey, I'm looking to move from Boston to Houston this year and want to know about the possible risks. A very open-ended question. Now, the response that user gets, if I kind of write it out just right here, sure, it looks like your mortgage is in good standing, blah, 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 blah. This looks like kind of a generic response that we might be able to get from a current customer service rep. The difference here is that this response could be coming from a customer service rep supported by a set of large language models, giving them a much deeper understanding of that customer to give them this exact answer for their purposes. Or it could be in a very tightly prescribed and well-tested chatbot that is actually sourcing from a number of different data sources to pull together this answer and serve up that summarized piece of knowledge to the user, like we were looking at Bing Chat. And if we take it kind of to the research and knowledge discovery side, we can see similar impacts where, we might need to find the right protein and fold for a drug that we're developing. And in the past, that would involve, going through, cognitive search databases that, may have been very advanced in terms of the semantic understanding they had of the data and the ability to serve up results. But the ability to synthesize all of the information together and link together summarizations and different pieces of content, this is really where large language models are going to help transform research and search moving into the future. So I know that was probably a lot for everyone. This is a huge space and it's hard to cover it in a very short period of time. But thank you so much for having me. Alok, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Rowan. This was very, very insightful. And I think you've sort of set the bar high that, hey, engage in whatever way, whether it's API application or with the offerings right now. I think there's a world of possibilities. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Garima.
Thank you. Thank you, Rowan. Thank you, Alok. It was indeed an insightful presentation, and I'm sure our audience is going home with a lot of takeaways, a lot of learnings around the generative AI applications and the possibilities out there, and also some prerequisites and considerations to consider before making use of this technology to its best possible use. So with that, I'll request our audience to put their comments, their questions in the chat, and we'll kickstart our next session for the day. Thanks, Alok. Thanks, Rowan.